All right, hello everybody. In this week's lecture video, we're going to be talking a little bit more specifics about some of the nuts and bolts of the upcoming policy speech. Um, Hopefully everyone had gotten their topic proposal submitted last Friday. I should have feedback sent back to just about all of you. If there were, for instance, delays in you submitting the topic proposal or anything like that, it might take me a little bit longer. So if I am a little slow in getting you your feedback to you, go ahead and just shoot me a quick email, kind of nudge me, and I'll get that to you as soon as possible. And of course, once you do have your feedback, I don't want that to necessarily be the end of that conversation. I'm more than happy to talk with you either via email or we can do a face-to-face video chat to kind of work out some of the specifics of your idea. But now that you have your topic, as you start to work on the research and writing process, what I want to talk about today is some patterns of organization. That is some different ways that you can take this broad topic and this policy proposal that you have and organize it in the best way to make a convincing and persuasive argument once you're actually presenting that policy to your audience. So before I dive into these specific patterns of organization, I just want to quickly recap some of the logistics of this upcoming policy speech. So as you know, the goal is to propose some sort of a policy solution to any ongoing public issue. Again, please, this is some feedback that I often give on this speech. It's best if you pick an existing policy. So if you're trying to choose something and you're coming up with something entirely on your own, you're creating a lot of extra work for yourself. Whereas if you choose something that already exists, either it's already been implemented or it's a proposal that exists that you can either suggest a modification for or suggest to advocate for that policy, that's going to be most successful for you. So that way you can focus on just the speech itself. As far as the actual details of it, it'll be 6 to 8 minutes. Just like before, you're going to record a video of yourself and upload that to Canvas. In addition to uploading that video, you will also then respond to some questions from the audience, and that'll be in the form of that discussion post. So once you upload that video, everyone will have a chance to write or comment a couple of questions, and you'll respond to some of those. And that's just to replace the in-class portion of what we would have done, which is an actual in-person Q&A session that's going to kind of simulate that. Actual deadlines for this, April 24th is going to be the date that you need to upload the video and submit that outline to Canvas, and then after that date you'll have a week, so until May 1st, to respond to at least 2 to 3 of those questions. So don't feel like you have to respond to every question that gets posted, but I do want you to provide a written response to at least some of those. Keep in mind this assignment is going to be worth 250 points. That's overall 1/4 of the total grade in the entire semester. So really this is kind of a good chance to give a good boost to your grade if that's what you're looking for, or if you're pretty happy with where your grade is currently, to kind of lock that in and put yourself in a good spot for the rest of the semester. As always, if there are questions about any of those specific logistics or assignment requirements, please feel free to email me or leave a comment below, and I'm happy to sort out any questions that you might have. All right, with that sorted out, let's dive into kind of thinking about some specifics for actually coming up with a good policy speech and organizing it in a clear way. So what I have here is 2 possible specific purpose statements for a policy speech. So in one case, I might be giving a speech to persuade my audience to vote against releasing a pack of rabid wolves on the CSU campus. So hopefully that's not a policy someone was planning on talking about. And another potential specific purpose statement for a policy speech might be to persuade my audience that releasing packs of rabid wolves can benefit local ecosystems. So they're both about kind of the same topic, but there is a slight difference in them. So in this first example, the outcome of what I'm trying to persuade the audience to do, there is an immediate action. There's a clear step that I want the audience to take. I want everyone to go out and vote against this, and this is the direct thing that I want to change. And the second one, which is just kind of broadly about the benefits or potential downsides of releasing rabid wolves on the ecosystem, that is still a persuasive argument, but it's more about passive agreement. I'm trying to get you to change your mind, but there's not necessarily a clear action at the very end. So as you're thinking about your topic, please make sure that you're coming up with some sort of immediate action. And then the idea is that in your speech, you're going to organize it in a way that introduces an issue, proposes a solution, and then drives us towards some sort of immediate action that we can take at the very end. Now, even if it's not immediate action that your audience is going to take, there needs to be some sort of actionable outcome to the speech itself. So you don't just want to give us an informative speech about the issue, but really persuade us that whatever policy that you have in mind should be implemented, and then there should be some clear actionable steps to make that policy actually happen. So once you've done that and kind of done your research, figured out here's the description of the public problem and here's my description of the policy solution that I have, you're going to want to choose a specific pattern of organization. Now, organization is important for any speech that you're going to give. Your audience needs to be able to follow your argument and your lines of reasoning. But for a persuasive speech, since you want to specifically change your audience's mind and create some sort of specific actionable outcome, that organization is going to be even more important. There needs to be a clear progression from problem to the policy solution. So what I'm going to do is quickly walk through a couple of different patterns of organization. Some of them are pretty straightforward and might seem obvious, but it is worth going over because once you've done a lot of research and done a lot of reading and even writing about a topic, you kind of become a little bit of that expert on that policy, and it's easy for you to kind of become so embroiled in that when you try to explain it to someone else, it might not be as clear. So having a distinct structure and organization to your speech helps you get those ideas from your head into the mind of the audience, and then lets you make that persuasive argument about your policy. So the first pattern of organization we're going to talk about is called problem solution. Like the name implies, there's two specific parts to it, the problem and the solution. So in general, if you use this, you're going to have your introduction, two main points, and then a conclusion at the very end, the problem, and then the solution. So this works really well if you have a topic that is a pretty simple issue. There's a clear connection between the public problem and the policy that you are proposing. The simplicity of this is really nice because it doesn't create a lot of room for the audience to lose track or become confused about what the issue is. So this is really good if it's simple. So in your first point, you're going to describe here's what the public issue is, here's who it's affecting, here's why it's a problem, here's the severity of it. And then in that second main point, you're going to propose your solution, tell us the specific details of that solution, how it works, how it gets paid for, all those details. So again, this works really well if it's simple. It helps the audience follow along really easily, but might not work so well if there's a lot of moving parts to the problem itself. The benefits of this, it's really easy for the audience to follow. There's only two main points. There's a natural progression from problem to solution. Like I said, though, that problem solution organization really only works for simple issues. If something is a little more complex, you might try to use what we call the problem cause solution pattern of organization, which should be hopefully self-explanatory. Instead of two main points, you're going to have three main points, the problem, the cause, and the solution. I know, mind-blowing stuff right here. In this one, basically, this works if the issue is a little bit more complex. Maybe the public issue is a little bit harder to understand, so you need a little bit of extra explanation there. So you're going to have three main points. We're adding in this whole extra point that's kind of explaining the cause of the problem. The reason that this is good is that if it's something that's a little bit difficult to understand, so maybe we're trying to talk about, I don't know, economic inequality, that's a pretty big issue. So I can talk about the problem, who it's affecting, but then I need to also give us a little bit more description about why this problem exists. And the reason I do that is because it's going to lead into a specific policy solution. So this works well if we have a really broad problem or a broad public issue, and our policy proposal still needs to be one specific actionable thing. And so we have this main point in the middle describing the cause of the problem to really link together the public problem and your policy solution. This is really good if there's a lot of specific details or moving parts to the policy or the problem, because you're kind of giving us that extra layer of explanation there. So honestly, my guess is that for most people, one of these first two patterns of organization is going to be a really good way to go if you're proposing kind of a new policy that should be implemented. If, however, you are talking about a policy that already exists and you want to propose that we change that policy or amend it in a certain way, a good strategy is to use what we call the comparative advantage pattern of organization. So this is really good if there's something that already exists and we're proposing a change to that policy that already exists. Just like it sounds like in the name, in the comparative advantage pattern of organization, we're doing a comparison. So we're going to talk about, here's the current policy in our first main point. Then in the second main point, we're going to talk about kind of what are the current deficiencies. Why is that current policy not working? So this is a good point to kind of talk about, here's what already exists in the world. It works a little bit, but here's all these ways that it could be better. So in those first two main points, you're really setting yourself up to describe the current situation and describe why that current situation isn't quite working as well as it could. So that way, in your third main point, you really give us your proposed policy. How do we change the current policy to make it better? So because we're doing a comparison, this works really well if we're talking about a policy that already exists and we're proposing changing it, but it also works pretty well if there's like two possible proposals. So for instance, during the public deliberation speeches, it was not too uncommon for us to see some speeches about some different options about, for instance, free college political proposals, and how, yes, it's a complex issue, but there's multiple different ways that people have proposed going about it. You could use the comparative advantage pattern to talk about why one particular option is better than the others and persuade us that this is the choice to go with. In this one, it's really important that you're giving us clear but also concise descriptions of each policy, because you're really talking about two possible policies. You don't want to spend too much time getting kind of in the weeds of the details, and you want to make sure that you're still making that clear argument of why your chosen policy is the best option. All right, so those first three ones are probably going to be a good pattern to use in most cases. They're pretty straightforward. The last one that our textbook talks about, though, can be really effective in certain situations, but it is kind of complicated. And this one is called Monroe's motivated sequence. And this one's really complicated because it throws out everything that we've done as far as speech organization goes and completely replaces it with its own structures and organization. So now we're going to have 5 points, and that's because we're replacing our traditional conclusion and introduction with all these aspects of Monroe's motivated sequence. So first we have an attention, our attention getter, kind of capture the audience, get them engaged in what you're going to talk about. Then you're going to talk about the need, so what is currently wrong, what's the current problem. Satisfaction, how do we satisfy that need? So that's where you're going to talk about your specific policy proposal. Visualization, this is kind of how Monroe's motivated sequence gets a little bit different. What does this policy look like when it's enacted in the real world? So tell us about how it would be implemented, and tell us about how individual lives would actually be changed by the policy. And then finally, action. You're going to conclude with a call to action telling the audience what you want them to do to make this policy happen. So this is really good if it's something that has some distinct actionable parts to it, so there's a clear visualization aspect to it. We know what this policy looks like when it's enacted, and also if there's a clear step that the audience can take to make it happen. I will say the Monroe's motivated sequence pattern is a little bit more complicated, so if you are planning on using this, I would encourage you to reach out to me and we can kind of talk about how best to make it happen. It is a little complicated, so the way that I like to remember all the parts, or kind of what Monroe's motivated sequence is about, is the greatest salesman of all time, Billy Mays, when he's talking about OxyClean. I guess we're just going to start the video right there. I will also post a video of the Billy Mays ad there, as well as a transcript of it that has some of the various highlighted parts of all those 5 steps there. And I think reading through that and kind of watching the video along with it can really help there. So for instance, you have the hi, Billy Mays here with OxyClean. It's an energetic attention getter at the beginning, and then it leads us all the way through those 5 steps to the very end with the call to action when he says, here's how to order. So if you are thinking about using Monroe's motivated sequence, I'd encourage you to watch that example video that I have posted below here, and also read through the transcript. What I've done is I've transcribed that advertisement and then highlighted the various parts of Monroe's motivated sequence in it. So what this all comes down to is that there's a lot of different ways that we can try to organize a policy speech. What I have here is a table that kind of summarizes what each pattern is and then what those main points are going to look like in your speech itself. Now this same table is in your textbook itself, so don't feel like you have to, copy this down from here, but I think this can be a really useful study guide, but also really good to kind of see here's how each of these patterns compares to one another, so that once you've chosen your topic and kind of have an idea of how complex or not complex it is, you can start trying to piece together those details into one of these patterns right here and see what's going to work best for you to make the most convincing argument. Like I said at the beginning, for policy speaking especially, persuading the audience to take a particular action can be difficult, so making sure you have one of these really clear patterns of organization is really going to help make your speech as persuasive as possible. So again, here's all the specific logistics and details for the upcoming policy speech assignment. So the video and the outline will be due on April 24th, and then you'll have an entire week after that to respond to any questions. During that week, I'll ask that you pose a couple of questions to some of your classmates. I'll pose a couple of questions too, so that way that everyone has a handful of questions to choose from to respond to. As you are working on your speech, whether that's the research phase, the writing phase, or kind of once you're put it all together and you're starting to practice it, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, concerns. I'm here to help you. This is one of the biggest assignments of the semester, but also everything that we've done up until this point has kind of built into this policy speech. So hopefully you will have all the tools and expertise that you need to be successful. As always, I'm reachable via email, or I have my virtual office hours Wednesday mornings. I'm also happy to kind of set up any other appointments as needed. All right, until next time, take care.